Hello everyone. This is Jeanette the Oracle coming to you to have another Entrepreneur Mentorship Hour as promised. So come on in. As you come in, let me know where you are joining from. Let me know what you're sipping on. I have some coffee right now. But as promised, I had shared a post from someone that was talking about, don't work twice as hard to make revenue only to make less profit, unless that's, what you want to do. And I was asking if folks, found that interesting and actually wanted to talk a little bit more about that, because I find that for entrepreneurs, particularly solopreneurs, but entrepreneurs in general, like this thing of revenue versus profit and what to prioritize. Because there'll be a focus on grow lots of revenue, and not so much on profit, and vice versa for a variety of reasons. So I want to talk about that today. I'm going to give a little bit of seconds for folks to pop in, and we will get in. So be a quick message. Now, as things go with these entrepreneur mentorship hours, if you do have any questions that you would like me to help you with, coach you through, you can use this time to do so. Feel free to leave a donation. There's a link in my bio for my PayPal. Let me actually put that here as well. I'll pin the comment so that you have it. And the info is also in my newsletter, which you should be signed on if you're not already. You can get that at my website, innersunalchemy.com. Again, that is innersunalchemy.com. If you scroll down to the bottom, there's a sign up form to subscribe to the newsletter. All right. Okay, so let's go ahead and get in. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Another sip. Okay, so let's talk about this now. Again, that post was saying, don't work twice as hard to generate revenue and then end up making less profit, unless that's something that you want to do specifically. And then the caption went on to talk about some other things, but I want to go a little bit deeper because, the prioritization of revenue versus profit for your business, whatever type of business you have. So whether you are a spiritual entrepreneur, you are a therapist, body worker, tarot reader, if you run a consultancy, you have an agency, like whatever it is, like this is going to be applicable to you. You have a product-based business, like you sell, body care or, jewelry or whatever. Like this is relevant, especially for product-based businesses, knowing those profit numbers, right? Those profit margins. But depending on where you are in your business is going to determine what is actually going to be, what really needs to be priority for you, okay, what to focus on. And I dive into this much more deeply in my free training, 6 Steps to 6 Figures, which you can sign up either on my website, it's there, or at the link in bio here. But revenue and profit are actually 2 of the 6 steps that I give, and they come after the first step, which is free. So the free step is when you are essentially gathering the wisdom, the expertise, the skills, the experience, or what have you from your job or your gifts, your talents, what have you. And you are essentially doing market research to figure out what you could possibly build a business around. You essentially are building the early parts of your brand, if you will. It's what you are essentially get known for. So for me, in my experience, doing this type of work as a spiritual life coach and business strategist is definitely on brand, because in particular for the how I center spirituality and everything like that has been a part of my life essentially since I was in middle school. So me doing this type of work is on brand because it's a natural evolution of who I am, what I bring, my expertise, my experience, etc. And it's going to be different things for different people. So your free stage, if you maybe you do like body care products, they could be born out of maybe a tradition in your family of creating these certain things, and you decide to actually turn them into a business. It could be like you having a particular issue with some type of skin condition, and you've created this formulation of body washes or lotions or what have you that have helped heal you or at least reduce the symptoms, and so you want to share that for others who also experience the same thing, right? That's all the free stage. But when you start a business, the point is to make money broadly, right? The point is to make money. And I say broadly because like there should be a deeper why, and that why definitely should be to help others, to serve, to make the world a better place, in my opinion. So the next step is to generate revenue, and you need to have that coming in before you can really start nitpicking about profit to a point. And I say to a point because, it's not just generating revenue just to generate revenue and, come what may, but you do want to be mindful of what you're actually keeping and holding on to, which is the profit once you get rid of, once you take into account the costs associated with delivering whatever service you have or sharing whatever products that you have with the world. And so you got to really think about that. What is actually going to be sustainable for the business, meaning how the pricing is structured so that you can continue to deliver that service or deliver that product, right? That kind of has to be built in. And if you are just focused on building revenue without any consideration of the costs of doing business, then what happens is you experience, hopefully having a lot of money or making a lot of money, I'll say, but you don't experience having a lot of money, right? So there's a difference between making a lot of money and having a lot of money. What you have is actually what stays with you when all is said and done. This is basically what's in your bank account. And what can happen is folks will be like, well, I'm making money, but I don't feel abundant. I feel stressed. I feel overwhelmed. And that's because the output that is required to get that particular level of revenue, at least how it's being done, is very high, and it's not in balance in such a way that you are getting your having needs met. And then you can mistakenly think that there's something wrong with your belief systems, oh, I have poverty consciousness, why is the money that I make not enough? And it's because it's actually not enough. Now, not enough could be, you might actually need to make more revenue because maybe your profit margins are actually good and they're solid, or, and what tends to be the case I find, your profit margins are terrible and you're not actually having enough money in the bank. So you're constantly essentially putting yourself in a position of living in a state of survival, right? Like this constant state of survival, of essentially living paycheck to paycheck. And if I don't get this next client or this next customer, everything is going to essentially fall apart. Or I have to do all this extra. And that is what creates that stress and that overwhelming and just I can't do any more than what I'm doing, because in truth, you can't. And so when we take a look at this, when we really look at our numbers, we can start to see where we are essentially exploiting our own labor, because we are trying to do too much, whether that is in terms of service and products that are being offered, or we're trying to do too much ourselves, meaning being the only one that is running things, that is getting things handled, right? So what I suggest as some tools or some tactics that you can do to kind of shift yourself and position yourself in such a way that there's more balance between this revenue and profit discussion is, well, first and foremost, like really be looking at what's happening in your business. So taking account of all of the services or all of the products, or both, because you might do both, right? We live in an abundant world. You can do what you want. So taking an account of what you have available to offer to any potential client or customer, seeing what is actually selling or what has sold, right? And looking at what's actually bringing in the most revenue of the options that you have. Now, if there's not a lot of data, maybe you might be new in business, so less than a year, or you might have been in business for a while, but maybe you are in the middle of transition or pivot, or you're offering new things. You might not have as much data. So, I would say like your focus is to continue to do your best to market and generate revenue for those services so you can figure out what's actually hitting and what's not, right? Hitting in terms of like what's actually a sale that's happening. So do an account of that, and then you will find, with the data that you have, what's actually bringing in the most amount of money. And usually it's going to be just a few things, maybe one or two, possibly three things that is actually driving the bulk of your revenue in your business. And then anything else that you have is just kind of sitting there, right? So one of the things I recommend is actually essentially getting rid of the stuff that is not bringing in revenue. And you can just choose to do with it what you want, depending on your business needs. So you can like completely get rid of it, or you can repurpose it in such a way to maybe bring additional value to what you're already offering in a service or a product or what have you, right? So say for instance, if you have a product-based business and you are, you are selling different scents of body lotion, and you have 5 different scents, and maybe you have 2 top sellers and one that's like a close third, and then the other 2 are not doing so well. You can do a sale and get rid of those other 2, right, as best as possible, or you can offer them as gifts for, maybe buying 2 or more of your popular ones, right? So that it adds value to what you have in order to move that product, generate revenue, but to also ultimately cut your costs so that you are leaning into what is working and what is generating revenue for you, and hopefully high profit. And for services, it could be, a different thing. Like maybe you offer, again, a slew of services, but out of the 5, maybe 2 only are the ones that are really bringing in the bulk of your revenue. You might just need to let go of those other offers, maybe repurpose them as lead magnets, or maybe incorporate them into the other services, again, to add additional value. You can do that. But that choice to look and to actually see what's happening, not what you think is happening, and not what you're trying to push to happen, right? But really seeing like, okay, what's here? Because in order for me to shift and move into something else, I actually first have to accept where I am, not the idea of where I am, but where I really am in this here and now. So you're going to do that. You're going to bring that consciousness, that conscientiousness, that love, that acceptance, that self-worth, that respect to what you are pouring so much of your energy, time, and effort into, right? So you're going to do that assessment. You're going to prune, right? And then you can start tweaking and looking at, these profit margins for those things that are really, those products or services that are really bringing in the bulk of the revenue. Like, where can you streamline costs? What would that look like? Okay. That might mean upgrading your technology a bit. It might mean, when you think about what is required to bring in some of this revenue, you might be spending a ridiculous amount of money on advertising. And you can look and say like, okay, it's costing this much to generate this these amount of sales. Is this return on investment worth it? Because that's actually a cost associated with that thing. It's not just, so, you know, if you have a service-based business, it's not just, you know, the cost of just doing the service, it's the cost of acquiring that new client. Same thing for products. It's not just the cost of making that product, but it's also the cost of the amount that you're going to need to make more of the same product. Like you need to have that buffer at least. The cost of just doing business in general, as well as the cost of acquiring new clients. Like that all has to be figured in. And when you look at that, that might actually update your profit margins considerably, right? In a way that they actually shrink because there's more costs that you haven't been taking into account. And so what can happen is you are putting in a lot more effort to acquire more leads and to get more work. But again, you're not taking home more money because that cost to acquire is so high. So that might be a tweak that needs to happen with your marketing strategy to, you know, reduce those costs in a certain way. Now, of course, another thing that's important here is bringing in additional help. And this is the part that can be tricky for solopreneurs in particular, is figuring out when it's necessary to bring someone on. And what I will tell you is, for the most part, once you get to that, well, there's so many variables with that, but I would say like, if you're on a trajectory of revenue growth and it's been, you know, consistent over a certain amount of time, and you can feel or you can sense in your body that the pace and the output that you have right now is good. It's not your most, it's not your greatest output, but it's just a good pace. Like if you were just going to keep this pace, you could rock with it, right? That's actually when you want to think about bringing someone in. You don't want to think about bringing someone in when you are actually fully maxed out. When your calendar's completely booked out, when your orders are being completely booked out, that's, by the time we get there, it's actually too late to bring in some help. And the help doesn't have to be a full-time employee. It doesn't even have to be part-time. You know, it could be less than part-time or what have you. You could just hire a contractor for helping you to either make the product or deliver the service, right? But if you wait until you're like, oh, I'm at my max, now I need help, that is too late. You want to ask for help when you're good, when you're golden, when it's a nice flow. When you're like, oh, I can do more, and you have that kind of energy, that's the point when you say, I need help. I need support. And you can work with a coach like me or someone else to determine like, okay, what would that help necessarily look like? I personally lean on the side of getting help for doing the actual either product creation or delivery or the service delivery more so than anything else. And the reason for that being is often the feeling of burnout and overwhelm is because the business can't exist without you. It's hard to take a break. It's hard to step away. It's hard to go be creative when it's just you. And if that brings up stuff of like, oh, I don't want to release control, or oh, it's going to be too much to train somebody, or I don't know if I really trust somebody, those are excuses. That is actually sabotaging beliefs. That's actually keeping you from being able to grow your business, because that's that inner sense of hyper independence and hyper vigilance. It's like everything has to be mine, everything has to be under my control. And no, we don't want to do that. So you want to bring somebody in much sooner than what you think. So for many of you, this is probably honestly going to be around the 50K to 75K a year range. If you're below that, you have the time and space to be delivering the product or the service. Now, if you really want to give yourself a nice long timeline, again, depending on how your business is structured, you could start doing some, kind of training or testing of the waters to bringing folks in that you might have in mind and be like, let me see how this helps, like in certain times of the year. Like if you get busy at certain times, you can just bring somebody in at that point to help out a bit. It can depend. But I would say a nice sweet spot to start thinking about training and getting help in would be around that 50 to 75 a year in revenue range, realistically. Now, of course, when I say that, you may be like, oh, well, I'm not making that much. I don't have enough to pay that person. You're going to have to think about how to pay that person, right? Because again, what they're bringing in is operational capacity. Your job as CEO is to bring leads ultimately. You're the one who is expanding the brand. You're the one who is championing, the marketing, the advertising, if you're using it, whatever that's looking like. Like that's your job, is to essentially cast the net and bring in the leads. And, if it's just you and maybe one other contractor for a couple hours a month, the two of you are facilitating that. But like in your mind, you need to be like, okay, if I get to like this 50 or 75K, I need to think that this is like anything else that comes after this is for paying another person. And if you have your products and your services priced well and you have a nice strong profit margin, you should also have some money in the bank to pay for them as well as yourself. That's a whole other thing too. It's just, we can get into that discussion another time, but you're going to have to make that investment because that's actually what it is. That is a cost that will and should, right? If you're picking good people and training them well, that should help bring you more money, because if they're delivering the product or the service to the standard that you have, you're going to have very happy clients. They're going to bring you referrals. They may become repeat clients, right? And ultimately, I'm sure your goal is to run a business, not to and manage a team of people and broaden the vision of how you want to serve in the world beyond just you. Now, for some of you, you might just want to have your business on the side as just a way to bring in extra money for to complement your job, and that's fine as well too. But for those of you who want your business to fully support you, if your vision for your business only goes as far as what you can do, you're in your ego flat out. Your vision isn't big enough. You're not actually following the assignment. Because as I always say, our success is collective. It necessarily should be including other people, right? It necessarily should be including other people. So I'll say that again. If your vision for your business stops at you and you don't see anyone else, you don't see any of the employees, you don't see any other leaders that you have as a part of your business, like, that is ego. The vision is not big enough. If you are choosing to be a business owner, choosing to be a CEO, it's because you are saying, I want to be a good steward of these gifts, these talents, these resources that benefit not only myself, but also my community and the people that I employ. Because as much as your business is going to be a blessing for you, it will be a blessing for those who will be working with you, not just your clients. Your business should also be helping somebody pay their rent and pay their insurance, give them a living wage. Like, that should be a part of that, right? But you won't be able to do that if you're not having these really, again, deeply conscious and conscientious time looking at your revenue and profit and determining what's actually needed based on where you are. And again, if you are at the beginning stages of your business or you're in the middle of a pivot or transition, the focus pretty much needs to be on revenue because you need to get numbers in. But you also still want to be mindful of costs. Once there is some stability in those numbers, then you start focusing on tightening up the costs and really looking at what goes into getting that revenue that you are generating so that you have healthy profit margins, so that what you make and what you have are karmically balanced. You can make 100K in a year, and kudos to you if you do. That's amazing. And real talk, most women entrepreneurs don't. So that is amazing. Trust me. You can make 100K a year. That doesn't mean you have 100K in the bank account. That doesn't mean that if you got sick, that your business will still be able to run for the next couple months. Right? Like, so we got to have different conversations. We got to have different thought processes. We have to approach this differently. We have to do business differently. It is not going to be sustainable in this world that we are creating to perpetuate the way capitalism operates in our own business. We cannot be our own oppressors, y'all. We just can't. Okay? So that is my thoughts on the revenue versus profit and growing and where some of that stuff can come up. If you have any questions, let me say hi to the folks that I was really just talking for the longest time. If you have any questions, you about what I spoke about, or you just want some quick coaching for your own business, something that's coming up for you, just want to chop it up a bit, I'll leave a few minutes here to give time for folks to comment. And I'll say all of this discussion is really to center. It's going to depend whether or not revenue is a priority right now for you in your business, or if profit and watching your profit margins are more of a priority. There's no right or wrong. It's really just going to depend on where you are. But hopefully with this discussion about some of the different considerations that come up will help you figure out what you actually need to focus on. Again, whether that is generating more revenue, whether that is increasing your profit margin so that you keep more of the money that you make and build up more savings and more of a safety net for yourself and your business. Or if that means it's time to bring on some help, whether that's contract help, part-time employee help, or full-time employee help. Okay. All right, any questions? Any questions? Hope everybody's doing well. We're officially a week in to Mercury retrograde, and we are right in between these eclipses, so this is a really interesting time. Oh yeah, I was going to talk about Saturn too. I wonder if I should do that in a separate video. Let me see. So I'll briefly mention this. In my group coaching program, Sovereign, which is for solopreneurs, right? Who've been in business for at least a year. You need to have like some time in. But this is also just my framework with business in general. So whether you're working in that program or with me one-on-one, depending on what's coming up in your business and what you're going through, one of the things that we will talk about is the impact of Saturn and the Saturn cycles on your business and what that looks like. So we understand, and y'all know, like I'm the intuitive astrologer, I'm the cyclical wisdom person. Like, those are my things, right? So that filters in through all of the strategy talk. But with a cycle, you have the beginning seed stage. Excuse me. So it's kind of like the void. Then you have that that growth phase, which is like the seed starting to sprout, which, let me tell you, is not a fun process. Right? So the seed energy is that free stage I was referencing before, where you're, thinking about what the business is, you are kind of establishing what the services and products are, all that kind of stuff. That seed stage would be like year 1 or year 2 of the business. Or if you've been in business for a little while, it's at that time when you are pivoting and transiting to the next stage. So it might be a rebrand, it might be a shift in the products that are being offered, it might be a shift in the services that are being offered, but there is a shift and it can feel like you are starting over, right? So we have that, and then we have the phase of, it's kind of like sustained growth, which would be kind of like the full moon energy. So you have stability, and it's more so keeping pace, right? And then you have a period of harvest, which is receiving of fruits, but it's really the beginning of the death phase process, because it's like the fruit is ripe on the vine and then it starts to drop off, the leaves drop off, and there starts to be a release, a retraction, and a coming back to that beginning phase, right? So we have that. So that can fit over the long term, or for a longer Saturn cycle over, 28.5 years. But we also have the Saturn transit cycle, which is when Saturn is going through a particular sign. And regardless of what the sign is, depending on what is going on in your business natal chart, you can specifically focus on that area. But specifically for the transit itself, Saturn goes through a sign approximately for 30 months. So you have these thirds, these period of 10 months where you are kind of like digging in and trying to figure out how Saturn is asking you to grow and developing mastery for that. So going essentially from an apprentice stage to an adept phase, and then getting to a stage of mastery once you have kind of refined as much as you can refine, and then move on to the next part of your cycle. So what I find often is that when you are at the beginning stage of your business, right, as well as when you are in that pivot transitionary phase, this Saturn process is strong. And what I tell folks is, while it's uncomfortable, if you can make it through whatever lesson Saturn has for you, but really it's like a place for you to grow, to get stronger, whatever thing that Saturn is helping you to get stronger about, if you can make it through that transit, that 30-month, 2.5-year transit, you will reap the rewards moving forward, because what Saturn wants to do is to make sure that you are strong in that area so that the foundation is stable and it won't shake, right? That's why the first 3 years of business are so hard, because you're having to test often, you're having to learn quickly, like it is the learning curve. But if you can stick it out and stay consistent to that 3 years, you automatically surpass like so many folks, because they fall off in that time period. But trust and know, you're going to deal with that again when you come up to the next pivot or transit in your business. And it may take, again, the full Saturn transit. I'm preaching to myself right now. The Spirit is coming for me. I'm preaching to myself right now. It might take that full 2.5 years to 3 years before you come out the other side of the transition and the pivots and the restructuring that Saturn wants you to do in order to grow for the next level, right? So keep that in mind, because I also have been seeing And this has been sad on my heart recently, but I've been sharing this throughout the year, like watching folks who have been like what we would consider to be hyper successful. So they have like 7-figure businesses, 8-figure businesses, or even like really well-established nonprofits, and they're closing those down. That hurts my heart because it's just like, it's only been like 7 or 8 years, and this, like, I can recognize this is a Saturn transit, and I'm in the middle of a pivot as well. Like, right, you've been seeing Interstate Alchemy shift since last year, but it's like, oh gosh, like this is what Saturn does. And again, it's not to make us weak, but it's like, are you going to drill down to that seed? Are you going to be more and more clear and committed to what is necessary to what's required, right? Are you going to make different choices because this is a different thing? So, the wisdom that you have is still relevant, but it doesn't mean that you are necessarily replicating what you did before. Your approach, your perspective, your offer, whatever, has to shift and change. And can you be adaptable? Can you be like water, Saturn and Pisces, to do that? So we're all facing this. I saw a comment. Let me get back to this. This is so good. I recently had to reconcile my feelings around cash flow, liquidity, and operating differently to ensure a sustainable yet aligned business. Yeah, listen, that part right there, it's when I tell you, whether it's with, again, my one-on-one coaching clients or in Sovereign, my small group coaching program, when we get to the money portion, which happens in month 2, it happens pretty quickly. It's a 6-month program, but we get into it in month 2. It's eye-opening because folks don't realize, right, what's actually happening, what's going on, and their reasoning behind why they do certain things, and how much we hold on to how we do things because it's like, oh, well, this is important, it should be here, or like that should happen. And it's like there's so much unpacking that has to happen around that. But ultimately, our approach to our business should be also a reflection of our approach to our own personal finances. And so if we see certain patterns of behavior with how we handle our own money, right? Propensity to take on a lot of debt, not really having any savings or money in the bank, always living that kind of paycheck to paycheck kind of thing, or being like, a little bit of wiggle room for like a month or 2 or 3, trust and believe that's going to show up in the business as well. Now, sometimes, that can show up because of external circumstances, things outside of your control. But if that's showing up when times are good as well as when times are tight, that's something that you got to look at, right? That's something that you got to look at and work on. And again, get support around, because we are not supposed to be doing this alone, y'all. Unless you literally went and got an MBA, please know and understand, you are not equipped to see all the places where you are getting stuck. You have to constantly be exposing yourself to new information, new support, new mentorship, whatever that's going to look like. Like, you just have to, because you only know what you know. So it's important to acquire more information. Not that you have to necessarily apply that information, but it will expand the toolbox, as my old acting teacher used to say. The tools in the toolbox. It will expand what's available in the toolbox to work with. And then you can use your creativity to apply those tools depending on where you are in that time. And what you need to use right now for your tools is different from what you had to use 3 years ago. Is different from what you're going to have to use 3 years in the future, right? Saturn crystallizing can be painful if you cannot flow. It's a different... The Saturn energy is interesting because we associate Saturn so much with the sign of Capricorn and earth energy and solidness, that we we miss that Saturn is really about frameworks, tactics, and tools, and approaches, and timing. So there's actually a lot more fluidity with Saturn than what we have been taught or imprinted to think and consider. So it feels comfortable for some folks when Saturn's in an earth sign like it was in Capricorn, because it's just like, okay, Saturn's at home, like we know we got to do these things or what have you. But Saturn being in other energy, for instance, in Pisces like it is right now, we're like, oh my gosh, what do I do with this? Because there's not a formula. There are principles. There are frameworks. There are methodologies. There are tactics. And decisions, good decision making has to happen in the moment, assessing what is actually here right now and what is best, and also having the wisdom of understanding timing and cycles to say like, okay, I know I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing to the best of my ability. I just have to sustain that until I get new information to shift. And that's where that consistency of Saturn and that consistency and discipline comes in. It's not even so much a rigidity to it's this way or the only way, but it's like I have to open my mind and be open enough and conscientious enough and conscious enough to purposefully utilize a particular framework, belief system, tactic, strategy, and test it out and see what happens. And it's either going to work or it's not going to work. And if it doesn't work, then I shift. And if it works, then I keep doing that and I refine over time, right? That's the mastery that Saturn brings. And yes, it can very much be painful depending on our personalities. And it's an interesting place to be in. I'm someone who sits in both. So I have a stellium and earth energy in my chart, but I'm also very much air and water with flow, like very much a creative, very much an artist. I'm so independent. I don't do well in corporate environments at all. Like I'm not about to play the office politics. That's why working, my past experience as a teacher, working in retail sales with makeup and skincare, like that was fun for me because while there was like some structure, obviously, because big corporations, there was independence. I wasn't being micromanaged. I wasn't having to conform too much to anything that's outside of my nature. So those are places where I flourish. But yeah, and entrepreneurship is just a step up from that with a lot more risk. So I don't have that safety and consistency that earth energy in me really likes. But, I know that about myself, so I can appreciate this dual nature, or the seemingly dual nature, but it's really the true nature of this archetype of Saturn that we have. This is so good. So glad I came across your profile yesterday. You explained it so perfectly. Oh, nice. Lovely. Well, I'm glad that you came across me. Do you also, what's your business? What's your product or service that you have? And any questions? But yeah, no, I love that comment earlier about cash flow and liquidity. And that honestly is the revenue and profit discussion. That's the Cliff Notes version of everything I was talking about in the first half hour of this. Is your financial strategy is going to be dependent on whether you focus on revenue or profit is going to determine what your financial strategy is going to look like, right? So if you are focused on increasing cash flow and liquidity, then you're going to be focused more on profit margins specifically, right? If you're focused on generating revenue, then not as much. And neither is good or bad. Sometimes you just need to make money. All right, so we are coming close to an hour. I didn't think I'd be on here that long, but I'm loving the discussion. anything else that folks want to touch on around this money stuff? I'm sure for some folks, you know, here in the US anyway, if there was any tough stuff around taxes, like that definitely should have opened up some deeper insight to look at in terms of how you are handling your money and stuff. For me, like, I do not like having the stress of worrying about, you know, do I owe something, or I don't like surprises when it comes to money unless it's me receiving money. I don't like surprise bills. No. So as best as possible, I definitely try to stay on top of what I need to do in terms of taxes before we get to tax season, so that I don't have any surprises. And I make sure that taxes are handled by a really good quality accountant. An accountant firm at this point for me. But I just, I don't do well with that stress. Again, too much earth energy in my chart for that kind of stress, as much of a free spiritor as I am. But given my history of, just growing up in poverty, like I can't, it brings up too much panic and too much anxiety, and it prevents me from showing up in the way I need to show up in my own life, much less the business. So, okay, so it looks like we don't have any additional questions, which is totally fine, or any other comments. If you like this and you would like to support, my donation info is there in the pinned comment. You can also go to the link in my bio. You'll see a donation tab there. Or if you're on my newsletter list, I have that in my my newsletter. For the folks who are just joining in, I'm just finishing up now, so definitely go back and watch the recording. Anybody who came in later in the process, definitely go back and watch the part that you missed. Please also share this with other entrepreneurs, particularly women solopreneurs that you know, whether they are service providers or have products. In particular, if they are leaned towards more of the spiritual side of things, because again, I integrate spirituality in everything. All of the business tactics and strategy tactics are based in spiritual tools and techniques. So, send to those who are really about that life rather than the folks who are just like, let me plug and play. And like, if I do these things in this kind of way, then, I'll get this kind of output. Like we got to do business differently. Cool. So let me see if I have any announcements. You can go to my website to sign up for newsletter. Also on my website, as I mentioned earlier, you can sign up for, and I think as well as the link in bio, you can sign up for my free 5-day training called 6 Steps to 6 Figures. So it is my broad outline or framework of the stages that you go through in order to get to 6 figures. And I talk about in that training why specifically 6 figures. Which I know for a lot of folks either in their job or possibly if they have an agency or consultancy, that might not seem like a lot of money. However, most women entrepreneurs don't actually hit that in their yearly revenue. Like truly, if you look at the numbers, they don't, especially for Black women. It's just, I'll share stats more on that. But yeah, so it's important to move the needle there. But the same principles hold true. I gave it that title because it's snazzy, 6 Steps to 6 Figures, but the same principles hold true for doing multiple 6 figures. Okay, so this discussion around revenue and profit and getting help is very much underlying. Like, there's really not a lot of new things that you need to know broadly to build your business. It's really just a matter of what is the business that you're being asked by your spirit to propagate at this stage in your life. Because what the part of your assignment, your divine assignment for this stage in your business may very well and most likely will be different than that which you are called to do 10 years from now, God willing, you're still around 10 years from now, right? So it's not a like, it's this and nothing else. It's right here, right now. This is the vision. This is the part of the vision that I am serving through my business. This is how the business is going to show up. And, this is what needs to be done for that. And, 5 years from now, we'll see. Because Saturn's gonna pop up and be like, we got to shift, right? We either got to shift and refine or something else, but it will come up. Okay. But again, thank you all for being here. Thank you for the lovely comments. Again, please like, share, comment, all the things. And then let me know, slide into my DMs. I do answer messages about any of the topics that you'd like me to discuss on Entrepreneur Mentorship Hour. I will also be opening up enrollment for the next iteration of the next cohort iteration of Sovereign for a summer session, and that will be opening towards the middle of May. I got to check the dates. So if you are interested in getting that support and like really full comprehensive support across the board in this 6-month small group, not you in a space with like 100 folks, small handful of folks, so you can really get support and customized coaching for what you're going through. Definitely roll through. If you have questions about it, again, you can shoot me a DM, go to the website. Information is there on the group coaching tab. But that will be opening up again soon. I would love to have you. And yeah, I think that's going to be it for me. All right. I do love you all. Thank you so much for being here and what you do. Thank you for having the courage to say yes to your divine assignment of whatever your business is. It is needed. It is needed. It's not supposed to be anybody else but you. That's why you were given it. So stick with it. And God willing, because tomorrow's not promised, but God willing, I will see you next time. Bye.